Welcome to Skill-Based Game, a fantasy football podcast. My name is Eric for erictries2hard.com, at erictries on Twitter. So I've got a whole podcast network if you want to hit up erictries2hard.com and check out lots of, humorous discussions with comedians you've never heard, or in-depth discussions about records you've probably never listened to. We've got shows for days on erictries2hard.com. This spring, wherever we're in, this fall, we're going to do a fantasy football podcast. We've got 2 episodes that we did for daily leagues back around playoffs and Super Bowl that are up on the site now, so you can ignore the shit out of those. I just want to make sure you know they exist. And so far I've done 4 or 5, depending on when you're seeing this, mock drafts that I've posted. If you're looking for who to pick in what positions and a discussion on that kind of thing, definitely hit up the mock drafts. But today what I'm going to talk about is 10 or 11 or 12, whatever my computer says, tips to just crush your draft. Now, this isn't going to be, get this player, reach for this guy then, or, stave off for this other guy then, or here's your list of sleepers. I'll get to that in the mock drafts, or I'm going to do a whole one on sleepers as we get closer to the season. Today was the day... I believe it's official that Kelvin Benjamin tore his ACL. So just to give you an idea of when this is being recorded, shit happens. I'm not about to start giving all this. Things are going to change. So we'll wait until closer to the season for that. But this is just for those of you who've seen my mock drafts. You know that I place a heavy emphasis, one of those two, on just general strategies. For fantasy football drafting, for fantasy football skill building, which is something that the weekly podcast that I'm going to be doing with Dan Cherokee of Bleacher Report this coming season is going to be. We're going to talk about it's kind of our philosophy where it's not like we don't want to tell you all the same stuff that everybody else is telling you. We know that there are much, or at least I can definitely vouch for much better experts out there who do this full time. That's great. Check them out if you want, the most recent news or some weekly picks. What we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about game scripts and how that's going to affect players' values if they based on the matchup. We're going to be talking about unlikely players to play or unlikely players to bench from week to week, and then we're going to focus the back end of the podcast on each week. We're going to talk about a different overarching strategy for fantasy football. So this is going to be strategies for the draft. So these are 10 or so tips to crush your draft, regardless of which players you want to choose. All right, number 1. Okay, I already crossed that one off. That's a different thing. That's a sleeper list. We'll talk about that later. Using injuries and suspensions to get draft value. So this is just a universal idea. This is pretty common. You want to make sure that you're aware of the players who are suspended or the players who are injured who you might get later in the season. I'll talk about keeper stuff in a little bit. But yeah, so it's rule number 1. That's funny. That's not even the rules. You know what? Screw that. Rule number 1 is how to use those things to get your draft value based on picking starters for a few weeks. And I guess we'll define sleeper. It's the age of the internet. It's the age of fantasy football podcasts and experts and people who do this for a living. There are no more sleepers. Just about every player is being talked about somewhere that may make an impact, and everyone, maybe a few players will slip through the cracks, but there's not going to be any player that there's some secret you're going to know about that nobody else is, and you're going to be able to pick them up. You might be able to best half to 3/4 of your league. Probably most people, except for one, if it's a friends and family league that's not that competitive. If you listen to the podcast, but you're not going to get in those expert leagues. You're not going to really get somebody that no one has been talking about. So anyway, when I say using injuries and suspensions to get a draft value, I don't mean like, oh yeah, he's suspended, so everyone's forgotten about him. No, I mean. Let's take a look at a couple of players. So we have Tom Brady, who as of now is suspended 4 games. So he's obviously going later. A common strategy, this is the one that everybody's been saying, is that you want to take him where he's going around the 9th round, and then grab an Eli Manning a little bit after that. Or Eli Manning would be the best of that bunch, I'd say. Or it's a handful of other quarterbacks who can easily get you up to 20 points a week, which is what you're shooting for. to get you through till Tom Brady's there. So it's a fantastic deal to you can even. I don't want to advocate necessarily reaching for Tom Brady, but if you grab him, if you're certain everybody else is going to get him at his ADP, you might as well grab him around early and just play him off another quarterback. Now, this won't necessarily work every year. A lot of these tips actually, they're underlying, strategies, but they're not necessarily, you have to have the right players and the right circumstances come up to utilize them. And this is one that this year you can definitely utilize. Another example, like we have a couple for running backs, because we have the whole Amir Abdullah, Joique Bell back and forth. And who knows, by the time the draft happens, we could just know that one of them is going to be the starter, and that's that. And so we can see, and that'll be easier. But as of right now, a lot of people are expecting, if Joique Bell's, feeling a little bit better, and they just announced that he's going to be the starter, we'll see. A lot of people are expecting him to start, and potentially after 3 to 5 weeks, start to stumble a little bit, and then have Abdullah pick up the rest for the rest of the season. If that's the case, and I know Abdullah's shooting up in his ADP, so that might not work. But I tell you what will be up in the air probably is the Trey Mason situation. Trey Mason, just like DeAngelo Williams, might be somebody you can grab pretty late, who isn't really going that high in drafts, and you're able to start them for a few weeks, which allows you to grab someone like Arian Foster. I mean, we still don't know how long he's going to be out, but assuming he won't be back till week 10, you could feasibly grab somebody in weeks, somebody like Gurley or DeAngelo, who are going to give you potentially, pretty great production for where you draft them, for 2 weeks in DeAngelo's case, and more for what's his nuts case, Trey Mason's case. So you very well could get insane value on that. Assuming, sorry, I'm just checking my phone there. I've got my baby monitor here. I got the whole setup going. I won't neglect you. I won't neglect you, fantasy football. You just relax. I got you. No, all right. So this is gonna be ridiculous for people hearing it on audio. Anyway, so we've got so you've got a couple of players like that where you could feasibly take someone like Trey Mason or DeAngelo Williams as your you want it for your third running back. The point is, you're able to grab an extra player who may actually, depending on how your draft goes, if your draft you end up with a couple of running backs early on and you got your starters, then you don't even need to worry about grabbing that. Maybe grab Gurley just in case. But if you really want to, I guess Arian Foster's going, but like 7th, 8th, if you want to reach for him and take him in a spot where you'd normally take someone who would be starting for you at the beginning, there is value in round 7 and later that you can just grab somebody who is being drafted lower because they're only going to be potentially decent for a couple of games. Even Joique Bell, if that's what dude, like 3 weeks ago, I would make that argument of grab Abdullah and just ride it out, ride the Joique Bell thing out, because that Joique Bell was going like 4 rounds before Abdullah, maybe. And so now it's completely flopped. So maybe Joique Bell is now someone who may give you good production, or at least have the opportunity to give good production for the first few weeks. But you can get them later in the drafts recently. So those are some definite places where you can use those suspensions, use those injuries to gain a little bit of value. That's what we're really going for in the draft, is value. Another thing for tight end, who got suspended for 4 weeks? What's wrong with me? Is it Gates? Hold on. You know what? Doesn't matter. I'm going to show my ignorance here. Not my ignorance. I'm going to show my terrible memory here. Point out whatever tight end that was who got suspended for 4 games. That is, you can grab him pretty late, and you can also grab one of the 6 or 7 tight ends that are at pretty much equal. That are going in, rounds 12, 13, 14. I'm rigid, so I need to look up that tight end, because it's going to kill me. Unable to connect to the internet. That's lovely. All right, anyway. Just mocking me, internet. All right, so that was number 1, finding value that way. I love how this is organized, right? All right. So with strategy number 2 for your draft. This is a tight end and a quarterback strategy, and this pertains specifically to this year, but in general, because the position, not because the positions are necessarily so deep, they are this year, and that's just going to depend on your player pool from year to year. But because you only need one of them, they are automatically pretty damn deep. But it just so happens that there's a lot of quarterbacks, like the eighth best quarterback this year is probably not going to be that much better than the 14th, 15th best quarterback. So you have a lot of options for waiting on quarterback, and tight end is even more so. That's like what fifth, sixth best tight end is going to be as good as like 14th best tight end, potentially. It's really just a crapshoot at this point. So with both of those, my strategy is not to. I know some people are like, well, I either want to be the first or the last to get a tight end or quarterback. I actually disagree with that. In the mock drafts that I've done, this happens time and time again. I just have to evaluate both positions at the start of every round, and my one rule is do not take a tight end or quarterback if you're getting them at what they're valued. You have to get them for less than what they're valued. For instance, if Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck are available at the very end of the second round or the very beginning of the third round, preferably, because I think that's the furthest they'd really fall, you can grab them because you're getting them ahead of, they're going mid-second round. In fact, I probably wouldn't take one unless it came to me in the beginning of the third round. Like, that's straight up, like, that's what I would do. And then there's a whole other, like, the next tier of tight, or whatever, not tier system's a little weird because you got stuff like it's almost like Manning and Breeze, Russell Wilson, and who else is right there? I guess Ben Roethlisberger a little bit. You have this, and Matt Ryan. You have this whole other, next tier. Cam Newton just got pushed down, obviously. If you can get one of those guys in round, like they come to you round 4, 5, 6, depending on which quarterback you're talking about, don't take them. But if they drop, take them. The reason why I'm saying not to take any of them in that position is because they're not going to do necessarily that much better than the guy you're taking in round 10, in round 9, in round 11 even, or further. The value isn't gonna be there. It's kind of like, this is something that I've noticed because this was asked in a mock draft. Somebody was like, hey, why he took like Andrew Luck first or Aaron Rodgers first, I forget, like overall. And everyone was kind of giving him shit for it. And he said, well, why? He's going to score, I'm pretty new to fantasy football, but he's going to score so many more points than all these other players. It's a no-brainer to me to take the guy that's going to score the most points. And my response to that is, in round 1, you can take a quarterback who's going to score X amount of points, or a running back who's going to score less points, and it looks like you're getting value. But here's the thing: because of the number of each position that you need to fill, assuming it's a one quarterback league, you're not gonna need to take a quarterback for the rest of the draft. You still have to take 2 running backs. So the point differential you're supposed to look at, because it's between positions with different quantity requirements of that position. You don't compare them to each other. That's complete apples and oranges, even if you're getting them in the same round. What you're comparing that quarterback to is the quarterback you would have taken in whatever round in the future. And then the running back, you're not going to compare the running back to a much, much later round. You're going to compare whatever running back or wide receiver that you would have taken to the last startable player on your roster for wide receiver, running back, or flex. You see what I'm saying? Because you have to play either one. It doesn't matter if you're going to take a quarterback in the 1st or the 12th, if that's your choice, the 1st or the 12th round. You wouldn't compare the running back to whatever running back you take in the 12th round. You would compare it to the running back you took in, let's say you're going all running backs and wide receivers for the first 5 picks to fill your league, assuming 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. You're going to compare it to that 5th round person. The point differential between your 1st round quarterback, this definitely works with tight ends. Quarterbacks, it's debatable, but it absolutely works with tight ends. Holy shit. It's not even really that debatable with quarterbacks. I just think if you get down to the numbers, you can see that. So the quarterback you're taking in round 1 isn't going to have that many more points in the quarterback you take in round 12 versus the running back you took in round 1 versus the running back you're going to take in round 5. The point differential is going to be much greater, especially because Aaron Rodgers may score more points than Eli Manning potentially. The differential might be greater than Jamal Charles versus who's going in the 5th, like Amir Abdullah. So the quarterbacks may seem to win in that scenario if that's kind of how we're basing it on. However, the difference is that's assuming you're going to take a quarterback in the 12th round. You're going to take, or 10th round, you're going to take somebody below that threshold. That instantly eliminates the possibility that you might be able to get, Eli Manning and Tom Brady in like the 9th and the 10th, or the 8th and the 10th. That ignores that possibility, which that point differential is going to be a lot smaller. Or that you might grab Russell Wilson in like the 6th, or somebody might fall. You might get Tony Romo in the 8th, and that you might see that point differential much closer than Eli Manning. Whatever it is, it assumes way too much about how you're going to draft the quarterback. So that's why you wait for both those positions, tight end and quarterback. Just wait until there's value. Because I have two things that have happened. Once, every time I've taken a quarterback or tight end at its current value, I have been bummed as shit. Not necessarily with my starting lineup. My starting lineup usually looks a little bit better than when I don't do it. However, my bench usually looks like crap. But we're playing for a season. We're not playing to win week 1. And so but when I don't grab one of those positions until the value comes up, which most of the time, you roll those dice, most of the time, it's not going to be until rounds 8 or 10 or later. But every once in a while, you get a great 3rd round value. You get a great 6th round value. It's amazing. That happened like 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 15 times. The majority, you're just going to have to wait, and your value's not going to come until the very end. But every single time I've mock drafted, a point of value for both of those positions has come up pretty much just once every time in the draft. So that's, yeah. Do I have to sum it up? I just rambled about it for like 7 minutes. I figure you got. All right, number 3. This is for keeper leagues, so I'll keep this kind of short. Make a keeper draft board for yourself. If you're not sure how to do this, what I just do is I take whatever the current. I use Fantasy Pros consensus rankings for whatever my scoring system is. I make an Excel sheet and I do it like a snake draft board. So 1 through 12 going left to right, and then 13 through 24, obviously depending on league size, going right to left, and then just do that for the whole thing. So it looks like a board, and I'm kind of seeing how teams line up according just to ADP or to consensus rankings. So I do that, and then go into, if you know what your league's keeper settings are, if you know the keepers that people are going to choose, great. But the truth is, probably not, because you're not going to pick them until right before the draft. But you can still, it's like playing on, theoretical hard mode, but that's, in my opinion, the best way to do it, where you look at everybody's options for keepers, and you look at your keeper settings, what rounds they can be kept in. You figure that out. It's a lot of work, but you figure it out, and you take the ones that have the best value. You can take equal value, but that's kind of pointless, and it's also kind of rare that happens. But you remove the ones with the best value, so you're basically predicting your other league mates' keepers, and then put them in the position that they would normally draft in. And so I know a lot of leagues will have that be the first couple rounds. So let's take it the simplest way, because I know lots of leagues have different settings, but they all this keeper board I'm talking about works the same way every time. So let's say your keepers are, you can keep any 2 players on your team, right? But you don't have to. So what ends up happening is you look at all the people who you expect somebody is going to keep the best 2 players on each team, or if they don't have 2 like really good players, I mean, sometimes that happens. You only necessarily select 1. So you remove those, put them in their own. You could put them at the top. I usually then, if that's what I'm doing, I would put them in. So it's like, okay, so those are going to be the first 12 picks of the draft if you're, automatically having them, or you're using your first, round or 2 of the draft to take all those players. And I just highlight them in yellow. Or for like my leagues that are more complicated, you get to keep your keepers like 2 or 3 or if it's off waivers at a specific round, I just kind of put them in the board where I think they're going to get drafted. And, you don't know the league order, so you just kind of have to, you don't necessarily have to guess. You can just kind of, plug them in there and just go, I know I can't have this guy in the 4th round because he's going to be gone at that point. So then once you have it all in, you've colored the ones in yellow that you can't, touch, then I go through with the players who are left and I mock drafted in my head, put myself in each different position, or I'll just do like one of each third, so like 4th place, 6th place, or 11th place, or whatever, for instance, and then I'll draft. I'll mock it in my head and see who I can take at this position, assuming everyone drafts at ADP. I know that that's not 100% accurate, but what it ends up doing for you is it lets you know at what point. First off, it helps inform your keepers, because you go, oh shit, this guy's value may be at this round, but based on the players who are going to be gone, I can probably throw him back, take a different guy who I might not be able to get, at the round that I can draft him. I don't know. It's usually if you have 2 players that are really close. I'm sitting here debating over if I'm going to keep Travis Kelce or CJ Spiller in a full point PPR league in the 8th round. I can only keep one of them. And so, or the 7th round, doesn't matter. I don't know why I'm getting so specific with my own things. So I have to, use that to figure it out. Do I think that based on position scarcity that it's worth that I can snag Kelce that late anyway? Or maybe like snag him a little earlier anyway? Or CJ Spiller is going to be easier to get? It's hard to tell. But it definitely helps inform keepers once you know what players are missing. More importantly, it informs your overall draft strategy. For instance, let's say you have a league, like I mentioned before, where you have anybody can keep 2 players and you keep them as your first 2 round picks. Once you actually look at who's getting kept, you can see what a 1st round pick is worth. You can see what a first round, is worth, who's left. Because the tiers are very different. Like right now we're looking at like, oh, I'm fine with the first 5 picks because I'll get a running back that I really love. Or I'm fine with the last like 3 or 4 picks because I know that I'll be getting 2 wide receivers back to back that are gonna be amazing for me. Great start to my team. Great strategy, and these are for leagues where you can choose, your starting position. But for that keeper league, the number 1 pick may be like a tier above everyone else in that first round, in all 12 picks. Because it just may shake out that based on who's allowed to be kept and who was on whose team, that let's just say, I'm trying to think who might be dropped off. Like, I don't know, let's say it's Calvin Johnson. Let's say the Calvin Johnson owner also had like Le'Veon Bell and Matt Forte. And that's who they want to keep. They're going to throw back, they're going to throw back Megatron. And I said Calvin Johnson, right? I love Charles Johnson, so I might have said that. Who knows? So they throw back Megatron. And it turns out everybody else only had 2 great players they wanted to keep. So what your first round looks like is Calvin Johnson, followed by like TJ Yeldon. And I guess it'd be somebody better than TJ Yeldon. But that's what I'm saying. You go right from Calvin Johnson to, and so you're like, well, I need to get that first, however you determine, picks. If you have that choice, do that. Or who knows, maybe the way it shakes out is that your first 12 picks in your draft are great. First 13 are great. And there's a huge drop-off between pick 13 and pick 14. It may benefit you, if you have choice, to pick the 12th because you're the only one who's going to get a great second-round pick. That's that. So that's a really good way a reason to do that. All right, let's see what's next. Reorganizing final picks of the draft. Everyone says take your defense second to last and take your kicker last. I'm trying to do this based on how things are randomized. And I'm going to include IDP in there. I would say, unless you're getting specific individual defensive players, your IDPs can actually go last. Last year I just streamed IDPs and it worked out amazingly. I made a killing off of nothing. I had my IDPs of last year that I drafted earlier. 2 got injured. We played with 3 in the league. 2 got injured and 1 was fine. But I just started streaming after that, and it was fantastic. Everybody else it was a crapshoot. They would have 1 guy who would do well, the other 2 who would usually be duds. Every once in a while, they'd have 2 players who did well. I was consistently having a high floor for all 3 of my players, just going off of weekly rankings and playing the matchups. if you're gonna draft him at the very end. I also would say draft a defense. You could draft at any point. So I would say draft the defense before the IDPs, but after the kicker. And here's why: I'm going to be streaming defenses all year long, and it's unlikely that I'm going to get a great defense anyway, because people are going to reach for the ones for even week one. So maybe grab a defense before a kicker if you're like, well, I think that defense is going to smash week one, so I want that defense. But you don't really know. Things change a lot from the offseason, so you don't really know. So that's important to. Did I just go out? Oh. So that's important to know. But what I would prefer is taking the kicker before the defense and before the IDPs. Well, IDPs except for certain players. I mean, I think that goes without saying. Like if you're that much ahead of your own position, it's just like the tight end thing. You can reach for him earlier if that's why. I don't think that that's necessarily the case with kicker or defense, because while IDPs are extremely random, like for the points they're going to give you, it's, I don't know, at least in the leagues I play with our settings, the kicker and defense is just as random, with the exception of a few IDPs. Anyway, so I would say taking a kicker before your IDPs or your defense, because if you can get a good kicker, just someone who can make those, depending on, again, scoring system. I play in a couple leagues where a kicker kicks a 50-yard field goal, and this might even be just normal scoring. They get 5 points. It's almost a damn touchdown. Like, you want a kicker who can do that if it's called upon them to do that. The kicker production's pretty damn random, but when you have the ability to your kicker has the ability to step up, however the game plays out, you want them to be able to make the most of that opportunity. And so if everyone else is grabbing a defense in the second to last round and grabbing a kicker in the last round, with the exception of 4 people who are going to reach for both positions, then grab your kicker, get a top 6 kicker, get the 5th or 6th best kicker who's going to be able to make those long 40, 50-yard field goals when it's asked of them. Let's see. So next up, where to draft J.J. Watt. This is all over the board if you're in an IDP league. Dude, if I were you, I would grab him after you take all of your starters. If I am me, I'm taking him sooner. But again, depends on your scoring system. If you get offensive points, then yeah, you could probably grab him. You can debate between whoever you're going to take for your starting flex, or J.J. Watt, I think. But he should be the first person, and he should be the first person off the board once your wide receivers and running backs and flex positions are stocked, in my opinion. Maybe grab him around ahead. I don't know. I know some people are grabbing him as the first overall pick because the point differential, but it's still random. It's still that random. It's not guaranteed he's always going to get that much work that he's going to get. They may decide, you know what, JJ, yeah, you're a physical monster and you're the man, but we don't want you in on tight end situations anymore. You're too valuable to us on defense. That could just happen, and that could eliminate a lot of the extra value that you can get out of them. You don't know what's going to happen now that Vince Wilfork's works on the team. Dynamics may shift. Jadeveon Clowney's coming. I mean, I guess that doesn't really. Okay, I'm going to admit, I don't know a whole lot about defensive football. I'm just a strategy and numbers kind of guy. So I'm talking over my head here. All I know is I'm watching Hard Knocks, and I'm like, yeah, okay. All right, anyway. God, just fucking sell myself out there. All right, anyway. So where to draft Watt? I think Watt right after, your starters. Reach for him if you want. I have a hard time taking him in the first 3 picks. I know some people really want him there, but then again, I'm not taking Gronk in the first round. I'm not taking Luck or Rodgers in the second round, and I think not taking Watt that early just because of his positional scarcity is necessarily. I think that's in line with my other strategies. So I think the reason behind those strategies syncs up with where to draft Watt. All right, point differentials. I already talked about the point differentials. So less. So I guess it is just 10 things. All right. Know the difference between a flyer and a sleeper. Flyer/sleeper versus a player with a moderate floor and a low ceiling. That's a big difference. So if you want, at the end of your draft, you want flyers, guys who you really have. They're either going to have, high risk, high reward. They're either not going to do shit for you, or they're going to be incredible for you. That can include backups. Also, sleepers, people who you expect. I define sleeper not as like a secret player, but I define sleeper as a player who's not going to put up many points at the beginning of the season, but will kick into gear as it goes in. You're going to want flyers and sleepers in the end of your draft. That's what you want. You want as many of them as you can, shove on, as many high upside for both. You can put on versus a player with a moderate floor and a low ceiling. I consider players like that, like Steve Smith, Anquan Boldin, Torrey Smith. If you caught a ball from Joe Flacco in the last couple of years, it's like there are a lot of players who they're going to put up some points. So maybe in a bye week you'll throw them in because you're like, well, I want to get a couple of points. I don't want to but as far as your draft, there's no reason to draft them when there are flyers that may blow up and sleepers that may wake up midway through this, that you are counting on waking up through halfway through the season. It's really important that you grab them as opposed to just a guy who, you're a stable player, and a couple times a year you're going to have a huge game because you're not playing them on the times they have the huge game. It's plus you can probably pick them up midway through the season on a bye week situation. It's really likely, and so other people may draft them, but those are the players who end up getting dropped when hot new players come up. When it's somebody's turn on the waiver wire, and you don't know if they're going to have a great week. They have one great week, and who knows, maybe they're the next stud, maybe not. But those are the type of players who are going to get dropped anyway for them. So they'll still be on the waiver wire. There's no, especially wide receivers. There's no shortage of players like that. All right, I've been counting. I wasn't going to do any fancy graphics or anything, so I was like, well, at least if I put my hands up to show the numbers, then whatever. That's my production value. Screw that. So, whoops, forgot. All right, anyway, 9. I think the last one I said was 2. All right. Okay, so don't be results-oriented when evaluating last year's draft. If you look at it and go, I made so many mistakes, say it because you were like, well, Monty Ball was untested. Toby Gerhart was in a new system, and was he really going to be that great? Stuff like that. Did I really trust Doug Martin to be good again? Whatever it was. That's not being results oriented. It's just wow, those were actually low probability things that I bet high on. But don't be like, man, I shouldn't have taken Jimmy Graham in the first. He got injured. I should there's all sorts of stuff I shouldn't have taken Adrian Peterson, the first overall pick. It's no, you should have, but stuff happens. You can't control that. Don't be results oriented. Which by the way I know sounds counterintuitive, but that just means is don't go, oh, I did this and then this happened. Using your one example to go, okay, and then extrapolate it. Oh, I'm never going to do that again with another person in that position. It's no. Reevaluate your decisions. If it was a good decision that didn't pan out, if your reasons behind it were good, great. Do that exact same thing again. There was a thin line between having an amazing season and having a terrible season because of something that you made the right decision, but it just didn't pan out for you. But also learn from those mistakes where you're in hindsight, it was pretty obvious that was a decision wasn't going to pan out. All right, number 10. Stop drafting backup quarterbacks and tight ends, please. Oh no, I skipped 2, so that was probably numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, my bad. So that was number 7. Now number 8. God damn it, it's a train wreck. All right, stop drafting backup quarterbacks and tight ends. First off, there's going to be plenty on the waiver wire, starting even after the draft. And second, when, again, like I talked about before, when hot new players get have a nice week or two, or usually just 1 week, and then they get snatched up. The people who are going to get dropped immediately for these new potential like breakouts are going to be the backup tight ends and the backup quarterbacks that people drafted when they shouldn't have drafted. That person who had that hot first week or first couple weeks who may be a breakout stud, that's the person you should have drafted instead of that backup tight end or backup quarterback. So they're going to be on the waiver wire anyway. So don't even worry about those backups. You're good. Now, if you get, if you get like Aaron Rodgers in the third somehow, definitely take him. And then if it's like, I don't know, if it's like the 8th round and you're like, Russell Wilson's just hanging out, or like Peyton Manning's just kind of hanging out there. Sure, if that's the backup you want, great. I mean, that's value on top of value, and you're not supposed to draft for trades, but you're not supposed to draft at value for trades. You're supposed to get the value so you can get more out of it later. So yeah, sure, do that. Grab Jimmy Graham and Gronk if you can get them in rounds 2 and 4 or 2 and 5. I don't know where Jimmy Graham's going right now, 2 and 5. Especially because if you're in a league with your flex to play it. Anyway, all right. So number 9, calculate players based on league setup. So here's the big thing. If you're in a league where I'll just say it. If my league mates watch this and snipe me, I'll be so bummed. Arian Foster. If you're in a keeper league and you can get value on the keeper position, take him. Take him ahead of when you normally take him. If you're in a keeper, or if you're in a league with an IR slot, grab him. Grab him. Grab Kelvin Benjamin. Grab keeper, I should say. Oh, I shouldn't even mention Arian Foster. I should just use Kelvin Benjamin. Son of a bitch. Whatever. Nobody gives a shit. It's about helping other people. It's not about helping myself. Yeah. So for me, for both of those players, I'm in a league that's a keeper league with value. So if I get them, I can just keep them a couple rounds ahead of the next one. And there are multiple IR slots, so I can just go ahead and grab them, put them on the IR, grab somebody else. The second waiver's open. It's just win-win, and it's not like, oh, it's a must get. No, it's like if I was gonna take them in somebody in I'm trying to think where I'd take Kevin White or now Kelvin Benjamin. If I have no idea where they're going now based on the injuries. But if you're able to take Kelvin Benjamin, round 10 maybe? He's not playing all year, so the ADP's gonna drop, and you can keep him in the 6th or 7th for next year, and you have an IR slot where you can just bench him all year and not have to worry about it. Boom! That's a no-brainer to reach for him. You could even argue if you're playing the long game, you can for multiple years for the keeper league, you can definitely grab him pretty early, grab him after your starters. Screw your first bench spot. You've got a guy who's you're protecting your future for the next year, and that's potentially. So that's just something to keep in mind. And lastly, 10 high floors on the first 2 rounds. It's high floors with similar systems, preferably same team or at least a similar system on the team. Just high floors. Whatever is comfortable. Not even necessarily flashy, just get your high floor players. High floors in the first 2 rounds, for the love of God. Yeah, high floors in the first rounds. All right, so there are 10 tips that I numbered, maybe, 6 of them for you. Hopefully that'll help you dominate your league. I gotta say stupid buzzwords like that, because that seems to be, that's the lingo that gets people searching for shit, I guess. How obnoxious would it be if after I post a couple of dumb mock drafts and people were responding well to them, that I came out after doing all the monotone shit and just being like, hey, you've reached Eric, the bad boy of fantasy football mock drafting, and you've reached and burn it on the music, and all the graphics and shit, and yeah, I gotta hate that shit. All right, anyway, listen. If you're podcasting about fantasy football, you don't have to act like an actual, have the attitude of a football player. I get it that in sports, you need the attitude, you need to have the I'm the best thing, you need to have that mojo going so that you can do well, and you can just, that you can do well. You don't need that in podcasting. You don't need that. All right, anyway. I love you. Dad? No. All right, I will catch you all later, probably, sort of. Peace.